Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Shelter and Faith series, part 6, Reflections on the Religious Roots of the Current Insurrection. We are pleased to present this series in conjunction and partnership with the Tent of Abraham. A few things before we begin. This event is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. Your microphone is muted for the entire presentation. You do not need a microphone, camera, or a screen if you only want to listen to this event, as it is accessible by landline or mobile phone. To join this event in listen-only mode, please dial any of the following numbers, and I'll read 2 of them aloud. 1-888-788-0099 or 1-833-548-0282 and slowly enter the webinar ID of 925-3372-0463. There's also a passcode of 20210315. We are taking questions. The Q&A period begins at about 11 a.m. If you're joining by computer, you'll see the Q&A icon on the attendee control bar down at the bottom. Tapping on this icon allows you to type your question or comment. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, please type their name in ahead of your entry. If you're joining by computer, down at the bottom of the Zoom control bar, you'll see audio settings in the left-hand side, and then Q&A in the middle, and then leave in a red rectangle. If you're joining using a mobile device, the Q&A icon likely appears near the top right corner of the screen, so everything's in reverse. In the upper left corner, you'll see Leave Meeting in red letters, the Q&A icon over on the right. Once the event begins, if you're joining by computer to see all panelists, you may need to use the Zoom control bar and select Gallery View. Depending on the size of your mobile device screen, you may need to scroll over to view whoever's speaking. And finally, if you're accessing this meeting via a Chromebook or a web browser only, you may not see all panelists at one time, only the panelists speaking. Ziggy Rendler-Bregman is moderating this morning's event. She's an artist and poet. Ziggy's been involved in interfaith work in the Santa Cruz community for decades and is founder of Tent of Abraham, which has been active for more than 15 years. She's also the chair of the Sangha Shantivanam, a Christian community which focuses on the contemplative practices as found in all the world's wisdom traditions. Find her work at ziggyrendlerbregman.com. We're now transitioning to panelists in gallery view. Please stand by.
There you are, Bev. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ziggy, one of the founders, as you heard, of Tent of Abraham. And welcome to the next installment here of Shelter and Faith. We're taking a critical conversation here, asking some really tough questions. Our topic this morning is religious reflections on the religious roots of the current insurrection. How has the rise of Christian nationalism, anti-Semitism, racism contributed to the current social climate and the events we all witnessed on January the 6th at the Capitol? We'll also have time at 11:30 for an extended interview on with our guest this morning if you'd like to stay. So with me is Reverly, you're now a Reverly, Bev, Brooke from Peace United Church in Santa Cruz, and Pastor Bobby Marchessault representing Missio Dei community based in Watsonville. We have Reverend Deborah Johnson of Innerlight Ministries, which I like to think of as sort of everywhere, and Rabbi Paula Marcus, head rabbi over at Temple Beth El and Aptos. We also have 3 local community members that you're going to hear from later in pre-recorded videos. So we'll open the Q&A, as Sarah said, a little later for you to ask the panelists questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'd like to begin by inviting each of you to take a few minutes to give us a 5-minute response to the same question. What is this moment telling us? What is this moment telling us? So Bev, would you like to begin? And you've got your unmute there.
Yeah. All this technical stuff. Good morning. My name is Reverend Beverly Brooke. Thank you to the Tent of Abraham and the Santa Cruz Public Library for inviting me to join today's esteemed panel. In light of full disclosure, I study and humbly attempt to follow the teachings of a radical lover, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. What this moment, January 6th, is telling us is that as Christian faith leaders, we cannot dismiss or stand by silently as our Christian faith is hijacked and our symbols weaponized. The quote, religion of the insurrection, end quote, is what psychotherapist David Rico describes as a religion of the ego, based on fear, not love, on attachment, not openness, on control, not freedom, and on entitlement, not standing up for justice without retaliation. It is also not the Christianity based on the teachings of Jesus, whose state-sanctioned murder happened because of his radical teachings of love. If we read the scriptures closely, we would know that Jesus would be for health care for all, lepers, addicts, and the marginalized, that he was inclusive, welcoming everyone at the table with enough food, witness Lazarus at the gate, loaves and fishes. And perhaps the most radical of all, Jesus was about the love of neighbor, the widow, the orphan, and the immigrant. This radical Christian life based on the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth reminds us that we are all God's children. And as God's children, no one person or group or tribe is better than another. It is inclusive and nonviolent. As radical Christians, we must take back our Christianity for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the great liberator and radical lover. What this moment is telling us is that the Proud Boys, militias, conspiracy theorists, Trump supporters, and oath keepers who showed up on January 6th do not, as some would like us to believe, hold dissimilar ideologies. Yes, they carried different banners, but the one they all carried with bold letters was religious freedom. Freedom to discriminate against anyone who does not hold Christian values or believe in a Christian nation. However, if you look closely at the small print under religious freedom, you will read Christian nationalism. And if you look even closer, what supports these two ideologies is the culture of white supremacy. While we, with all good intentions, try to understand how these white men and women feel so disenfranchised, even though white people are still in power, we would be missing the point. This is the systematic and methodical politic of the white supremacy culture, and that is to center whiteness. It is a system that separates us and is evident when people in power and in the pulpit are afraid of expressing conflict and equating the raising of difficult issues with being impolite or rude or out of line. White supremacy does not need active racists to function. Silence is consent. It is time to raise the difficult issues, to call out racism and the culture of white supremacy, and to preach the teachings of Jesus, reminding folks that Jesus was neither a Christian nor white. What this moment is telling us is now is the time we must recognize, dismantle, destroy, and bury the deep-rooted presence of white supremacy in our communities, schools, law enforcement, and churches. The insurrectionists are not outsiders. They are our neighbors, our congregants, our veterans, our law enforcement and firefighters, educators, family members, and clergy colleagues. As a community, as a people, as Christians, this is our call in the 21st century. There is no way around it. We have lamented this call and dragged our feet. We have run the opposite way of Nivea for far too long. Dismantling our white supremacy culture and the constructs of whiteness is a lifelong journey. While I believe resurrection is possible, it will take all of us rising up. Radical Christianity is the vanguard in the struggle for freedom. We must enter this fray with wild abandon because it is the only way we can build safe, healthy, and responsible communities everyone deserves. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? In April 1963, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a letter from the Birmingham jail calling out his white Christian clergy colleagues to stand up as witnesses to the brutality of racism and the culture of white supremacy, and to live out the radical love of Jesus. Friends and colleagues, January 6th was our letter from the Birmingham jail. We dismiss it at our collective peril.
Oh, thank you, Beth. Paula, what is this moment telling us?
Thank you, and thank you to the library and to my beloved colleagues in the Tent of Abraham for this opportunity. I always love it when a minister gives a quote from a rabbi. And when you said, if not now, and if not us, right? If not now, when, and if not us, who? Which always reminds me of Rabbi Hillel, who said, if I am just for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So what is this moment telling us? You know, when we started planning this program, we weren't as close to Passover as we are now. It's less than 2 weeks away. And I wanted to just show you all one of my favorite t-shirts that I like to wear that was produced by Trua, which is a rabbinic human rights organization I was on the board of for many years. And it feels like this is where we are right now. As Rev Bev was talking about, when I wear this t-shirt, I feel like I'm wearing my ancestors on my body. That's what comes up for me, that I feel like I'm wearing them. They're on my shoulders, they're within me. And as January 6th showed us, we have a lot of work to do, and we have to do it together. We have to do it together. It's not news. If we've been paying attention, this is not news, right? This has been happening for years. We've mourned all the horrible, tragic, murderous deaths that happened in Charlottesville and Oklahoma City and Charleston and El Paso and Squirrel Hill. And unfortunately, we know the list goes on. And this was really the crescendo, is what I would say. And it was a revelation of just how far, that's the revelation, just how far we've gone and how close to the edge we are. And it was a day of reckoning with the truth. And it was a showdown, an attempt to kind of hijack the truth. So as a Jewish leader, for me, what happens is that I summon up the resiliency and courage that my people have lived with for so many generations, with this, as this t-shirt just exemplifies, this commitment to preserving life, to choosing life, And part of the Passover story includes the midwives, Shifra and Pua, these two women who were told by the Pharaoh to go and murder all the little Israelite baby boys in the Nile. And Pharaoh said, you have to go do this. And you know, what's so interesting about the story is not only that they said no, not only did they not do that, But it's not clear exactly if they were Israelites or Egyptians, these midwives. Shifra and Pua, it says they were midwives to the Israelite women. So this partnership of maybe Egyptian midwives really stepping in and stepping forward to preserve the life of other people's babies. People, maybe they didn't even all get along all the time, right? Maybe there wasn't consensus about what was right and what was true, but their commitment to preserving life and to bringing in new potential was the first example that I know about of risking one's life to preserve life. That was an incredible story, and it's still alive, this story. And so what I think this calls upon us to do is to get involved in this messy birth process, right? Because birth is hard, right? Pushing and crying. And I'll tell you, anybody, if you've birthed a baby, you know it is messy. It's kind of, just getting right down into it. And this is what, are we going to be midwives? This is what this moment is telling me. Are we going to step in? Are we going to midwife a new world? Are we going to be able to birth something together across all different kinds of lines, race, faith, economic background, political differences even, right? If someone who I disagree with politically needs help in birthing a baby, not that I'm the best midwife in the world, I have some very good friends who are midwives, but I want to help them, right? So that's what happened in this story of Passover. These women came in and they took care. And then guess what? Pharaoh called them to task for it. Pharaoh said, I hear you haven't been listening to what I told you to do. And they're like, oh, you know what? Those Jewish women, they have babies so quickly, we can't get there in time. I wish that had been what happened to me, but it didn't. But in any case, the point is they took a risk. They risked their lives. They risked their lives. And later on, the rabbis teach us that the midwives received abundance in return. So that's what we're looking for right now. We're looking for this opportunity as a time to care for each other, to midwife what is possible, right? And to take care of each other, to reach across and pull the baby out, to help pull the baby out and to keep breathing, right? Because that's involved in labor as well. So as we move towards Passover, in my tradition, this is what I'm lifting up and carrying with me. And this is a shared tradition because we all share the Bible. And I really believe that if we're able to, as Rev Bev was talking about, this version of Christianity that is so filled with truth and so filled with justice, we have this in our shared tradition. And I really believe that if we have the vision and the courage and the patience and the willingness to risk, we too can be midwives.
Thank you, Rabbi Paula. Pastor Bobby, what is this moment telling us?
Hey there. All right. Well, first of all, man, good stuff. Thank you both. And I look forward to Rev Deb. I am incredibly honored and privileged to get to be a part of this with not only colleagues, but people I consider friends, and to do this work with all of you. And thank you to the library and Tent for making this possible. And it's the sign of our times. If you're watching, you'll see I'm surrounded by my wife's second grade classroom usually, because that's what life is these days. In response to the question, as I think about the insurrection, first of all, January 6th was actually my youngest daughter's birthday, and being in stay at home at the time, and really at the height, one of the heights of our pandemic this past year, we were on winter break from school. So I had taken the day off to spend celebrating as a family. And so it left me in the same place as many of you, at home with ample opportunity to watch in real time what was taking place. We'd been playing a game and I checked on my phone, that Facebook app, which just calls my addiction on occasion, and to see that a friend had posted a picture of guards with guns at the door of the chambers. And my jaw just dropped. Hard to believe what I was seeing. So we turned on the TV, and as I saw what was happening, I remember looking at my wife, choked up with tears in my eyes, just overcome with what was happening. I truly don't remember how much of the religious paraphernalia I saw in that moment, but I do know that in the hours and days that follows, I definitely saw it, and I wish I could say I was more surprised than I was. January 6th on the Christian calendar is what we call Epiphany. Now, real quick, my background growing up in my faith journey, it was very much in evangelical circles. Some of my most significant portions of my journey have been in pretty conservative evangelical settings. Now, I'd probably most fairly today say I'm maybe ex-evangelical. Maybe that's a word you've heard, maybe not. But that gives you a smidge of a taste where I come from. And in my past, we didn't necessarily follow this church calendar a lot, but even a lot of evangelical communities are beginning to recognize it. And I found a lot of beauty in the ways that it invites us to reflect on important stories. And Epiphany comes from the Greek word for manifestation. And it's a time that we recognize the manifestation of the divine through the person of Jesus. And in the West, the story that is primarily centered on that day is that of the Magi. Many of you know them as the wise men, these mystical, mysterious figures from the East who follow a star to find the Christ child and pay their respects to this newly born king. Herod the Great is king over Judea at the time, hears about this and sees it as a threat to his power. And as such, he uses power and violence, killing all boys under 2 in the area as a way to protect his own power. And no doubt Matthew, who tells this story in his gospel account, would expect his readers to immediately see the parallels to the Hebrew Bible and the story that Rabbi Paula already covered so well for me. When a Pharaoh who sees the Israelites as potentially rising up in effort to protect his power uses violence to protect that position. So for me, it was quite surreal on that day that as we're remembering this story, in a sense, we're seeing the exact same principles playing out in real time, seeing violence erupt for the exact purpose of keeping and protecting a position of power. As I mentioned, Epiphany means manifestation. And in that event, we saw the manifestation of toxic religion, evidenced by Jesus saves signs and white Jesus images with a MAGA cap. It's hard to deny. It was a manifestation of toxic masculinity, colonization, and entitlement. And while the presence of religious symbolism was disappointing, even shocking, it was a manifestation of, or the natural outcome of much of how we have interpreted and manipulated our texts and traditions for the sake of power over time. So what is this moment telling us? I think in large part is an invitation to take a deep and honest look at who we've been and who we are becoming. Those of you listening now were invited to send a question to us. And one that stuck out to me, one of the questions that came in was, what happened in the last few years in evangelicalism to make this possible? I found that interesting and have 3 quick responses to that. First, I'd say nothing much really. There's been toxic masculinity as well as racism, both overt and subtle, that has existed within that movement, our movement, for a long time now. If we have a chance, I can point to some examples later, but there are some good resources out there on the topic, including some books by Christian DeMay called Jesus and John Wayne, Unholy by Sarah Posner, or Taking Back America for God by Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry, if you want to look at some of those. Second, at the same time, there is something that changed, and that is a slow shift in power and privilege. The way I've heard it said and repeated numerous times is that when you've been in a position of privilege for so long, equality can feel a lot like oppression. And so I think a lot of that has changed. And in this moment, well, some of that manifestation wasn't just on January 6th. In 2016, when we saw 78 to 81% of white evangelicals vote for 45, while only 8% of our Black Protestant siblings did, that communicates something. And this moment, I think, is inviting us to listen to one another, to build empathy, to put our marginalized siblings above ourselves, which, by the way, is an overtly Christian teaching. And finally, I think it's important to recognize that while, yes, evangelical culture is what was brought up and is the loudest, 2 facts are that there are those of us through events like this who are hoping to display that there are other voices, that those do not represent us. Yet at the same time, it is not purely an evangelical problem. I've been in the evangelical world. I still have many friends who identify there. Now I'm more in what we call a mainline Protestant movement called the Disciples of Christ. And these realities exist in all of these spaces and in our communities as well, in every sphere of our culture. And it's really easy for us in an event like this to look at the moment at the Capitol and speak against it and feel like, because we are talking with people who agree at this atrocious act, that we are free from the influences of white supremacy and pat ourselves on the back. But we are not. We're invited, I think, in this moment to look not only within our communities, but within ourselves. I know I need to. So I just finish that up by saying we have an opportunity, I think, marked in large part by this pandemic, to slow down and reflect on who we are. And the question that I have is, as we begin to slowly emerge from this past year, and in some senses, these past 4 years, in many senses, a much longer history, will we go back to what was and brush the religious roots of this moment back under the rug? Or can we accept this invitation and go on a journey of difficult and uncomfortable change? And in this space, I'd suggest, as we talk about the religious roots, that while we need to address those within our faith traditions and communities, these same traditions also have stories and principles that can save us from ourselves and take us on that journey that we need to take.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Thank you. Thank you. Rev D, it's your turn. What is this moment telling us?
Well, I too want to thank the library for hosting an event like this, and to all of my esteemed colleagues here, and to everyone who is listening. You know, what a moment we are in. I echo everything that my colleagues have said. I agree with it all 100%. So I won't be repetitive. I'll just give additional perspective on it. If I can reference some of the things that have already been said and quote one of my heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said that the days of segregation were over. You could be certain of that. The only thing uncertain about it is how costly the segregationists were going to make the funeral. This is the moment that we are in. The days of the supremacy are over. We can be certain of that. The only thing uncertain is how costly the supremacists are going to make the funeral. So the bookend here is that, yes, we have to midwife, but we also have to hospice. And as religious leaders, we know about hospicing. We know about the grief, the rage, the anger, the denial, all of the things that come up at that moment of the transitioning, because for every birth, there's a death. For every birth that's coming of a baby, they're dying to the life that they had in the womb. There's this constant cycling and recycling that takes place. As one from part of my heritage being from the African diaspora, I'm so well aware of how religion, particularly the Christian religion, has been this double-edged sword, where Christianity was used as a tool of the state in order to perpetuate the transatlantic slave trade. It was also the same Christianity that became the roots of the whole abolitionist liberation movement that led towards the end of slavery. See, so you have these same tenets, and which way are you looking at it? This thing that happened on January 6th is not a one-off. It is just pulling the veil off of something that's not only been here, but that continuously goes on. And it's kind of interesting how shocked my white brothers and sisters have been to say, well, this is what it's been like in communities of color all along. Kind of like the body cameras now and the cell phones are showing us the George Floyds, but it isn't new. So part of what I see that's happening here in this moment is that all of us have to get out of denial. All of us. That we need to quit fighting about who's the real American. We're all American. It isn't just, well, no, that's not the way we are. No, this is the way we are. This is it. And what do we really want? I believe in King's dream. And this dream was about the sons and the daughters of the slaves and the slave owners walking hand in hand. This is what my religion tells me. I grew up Black evangelical. And I can tell you the Black evangelicals weren't there on January the 6th. Because our Jesus is another Jesus. And I think this moment is really calling on us to be reflective, to be honest about the ways in which our sacred texts have been used to justify the supremacy, the entitlement, the manifest destiny of we can just take over and own everything. And we can also find within these same texts, within the same tradition, everything about love, everything about compassion, everything about creating the beloved community. And I would say, if anything, what this moment is telling me is that if you really want the latter, you cannot be silent. Like King says, it doesn't come in on the wings of inevitability. That we are coming as close to Nazi Germany as we have ever seen. And if we really want a democracy, if we really want civility, if we really want a place where we have a society in which we all can fit, this is not the time for silence or complicity. It's not the time for wholesale judgment either. It's not the time to hate people hating. It's not the time to judge people judging. Now is the time to dig really, really deep within ourselves and say, what is our intent? Are we gonna be, we're one or we won? Do you want to win? Is that what you want? Or do you want a world that's safe for all of us?
Feels like almost the only response here is some silence. Thank you. This is why we invite pastors to help us to see what this moment is telling us. And each of us had some experience of watching and experiencing that January 6th event. And so we thought it would be helpful to hear from some local community members to tell us what it was like for them. And so we asked them the same question. What was it like for you to watch the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th? And how does it relate to your lived experience here in Santa Cruz County? So Bev, will you introduce Kayla, our first video? And I want to remind the panelists here to go ahead and turn your video off so that we can see the whole video.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend and fellow Juvenile Justice Commissioner, Kayla Kumar. Kayla has dedicated her entire career to the act of organizing people around the love, resilience, and possibility found within community. Her work operates at the intersection of youth, race, economic, food, and housing justice. She has been guided most by her work supporting marginalized youth, young people in spaces ranging from music classrooms, city streets, juvenile halls, and organic farms. She currently works at a youth empowerment organization named Food Wet, serves on the board of Salud para la Gente, Santa Cruz Community Ventures, and the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commission of Santa Cruz County, and is a member of the organizing committee of the Coastal Commons Community Land Trust. I give you Kayla.
Hey everyone, my name is Kayla Kumar. I use she, her pronouns. I've been living in Santa Cruz for about 8 years now. I want to thank my friend Rev Bev for inviting me to participate in today's event and share a little bit about how I experienced the insurrection that took place on January 6th. You know, I have to say, when I first saw what was going on at the Capitol, one of my first thoughts was, yeah, right, you know, like, give it a go, give it a try, have at it, because I've been to the Capitol. It's really safe, and it was such an important day that I had assumed that there would be heightened security. On top of that, looking at the people that were putting forward this coup, you know, extremists, people rooted in a very false and flimsy white supremacist ideology, people that I find it very difficult to take seriously, even though their ideologies are deeply disturbing. And in no short time, I realized, I think along with a lot of people, that this was not just a performance to prove a point, but actually a political tactic, one of using violence rooted in white supremacy to gain a political outcome for then President Trump. And, you know, I think my second thought from there is that there is just no way that if these people were predominantly BIPOC, that people would be leaving alive or not in cuffs, right? But the ease with which these coup starters were allowed violence to take place and then leave. I mean, it would be shocking if it wasn't so normal in our society that does operate using white supremacy. So, you know, to see it took me to a dark but familiar place as a person of color, one who does engage with my fellow BIPOC community in peaceful organizing, in peaceful demonstrations, in peaceful work. And yet oftentimes, especially locally, we're told that we are asking for too much, that we are unreasonable, that we're aggressive, that we don't have a good enough sense about what is realistic. And then you lift up the example of what happened on January 6th, of a group of predominantly white people operating on white supremacy, having a violent hissy fit about an election result, and being able to desecrate the most sacred political space in our country without much resistance. It just really illustrates the double standard and the pain and the oppression that the BIPOC community experiences. So, sorry to be sharing on such a somber note, but I appreciate the chance to be able to share with you all, and I hope you take good care. Bye now.
All right, this next video is from my friend Bree Buxton, and I've known Bree for, I think, around 10 years. Gotten to know her as part of the theater community in Santa Cruz. She's part of my Cabrillo stage family, and she's grown up here in Santa Cruz. She's an amazing doula, and I had the privilege of hearing her share at a Black Lives Matter event that happened in Capitola last year. And she has been using her voice to speak out more and more about race relation issues as well as social justice. And so she immediately came to mind as somebody to invite into this. So that's the next video you'll be seeing.
Watching the terrorist attack on the Capitol on January 6th is just another slap in the face to know that if this was a Black Lives Matter protest, if this had been people marching for multicultural and multiracial justice, there would have been tanks in the streets. Better believe that National Guard would have been called real quick. And the comparison of what had been happening earlier in the summer of 2020 with protesters being tear gassed, being shot with rubber bullets, comparing that to this mob of white, predominantly male people just sauntering in to the Capitol, showcasing that nothing they could do was beyond their personal safety, wasn't a surprise. People always want to believe that the devil is outside and that their own little sphere is safe or good or protected or right. And no one wants to believe that, something like, threats to home and life and property and bodies, Black bodies, bodies of color. People don't want to think that could happen in a place like Santa Cruz. But if what was showcased at the Capitol riots on January 6th, if what was showcased there was just a demonstration of the sentiment of a percentage of America, then how do people living in a predominantly white community like Santa Cruz, how can people not believe that this sentiment could be here? That there are people here who wholeheartedly, with every fiber of their being, are afraid to let go of the status quo, to change the way that things are. Even when it means it's going to be better for more people. Ask our Black UCSC students how they felt about the noose being hung at the base of campus, of which there was video of it being put up. Ask your parents of color what they think about finding, hand-painted rocks at Blue Ball Park with the message, nowhiteguilt.org. I do have a hope that it was such a culminating moment that places like Santa Cruz, that they saw this and realize that the status quo needs to change. That was a surprise. Thinking that this might be a turning point, that it just might be a chance for us to learn our lesson.
I want to take a breath for a moment and take in the incredibly powerful videos we've just seen and welcome the video from Karen Babbitt, who is an incredible teacher and actress, comedian, and I really would say speaker of truth and a very active member of Temple Bethel. Thank you, Karen, for this message.
I'm Karen Babbitt, and I'm the daughter of number 61016 Auschwitz. So I'm called a second generation Auschwitz survivor, which is a misnomer because it infers that I wasn't there. And what science is teaching us is about transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, which means I have memory. And plus, I was an ova inside of my mother, so I was there and was affected. I moved to the Santa Cruz Mountains in 1988, and I lived across the street from my mother until she died in 2009. So over 21 years, as is common in survivor families, we ate, slept, and breathed Holocaust trauma. And the paradoxical message it was always the same. You never trust anybody who isn't Jewish, but don't you be Jewish, all right? And the Nazis, they will come again. But you see, America is the land of the free, the home of the brave, and we are in this beautiful forest in the Santa Cruz Mountains, so it's not going to happen here. And then on June 6th, Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller was shot by a Boogaloo boy, and it was an event here in Ben Lomond. There were bombs going up, helicopters overhead. We were told to lock our doors, and there I am, I'm face down on my carpet. And I feel like this is familiar, and I feel like people are going to come bursting through the redwoods at any minute, and they're going to shoot me dead. And it was just a half a year later, on January 6th, that the insurrection happened. And I was glued to CNN, and I was clutching my shirt like this, partly to have something to hold on to, but also to kind of cover my heart, because I felt so vulnerable. And because of the sheer volume of people, there were hordes of people, and nobody was stopping them. Where's the National Guard? Where's the cops? How is it okay that they can just storm the Capitol and they've got flags and they got symbols and they're yelling things, and it feels like I've been there before, and that it was all this self-fulfilling prophecy that was coming true. And I felt like everybody in the building and the President of the United States and perhaps all of America was complicit, because not only didn't we try to stop this kind of hate, we defended the right to express it. And when I saw the guy with the shirt that said Camp Auschwitz, this became personal. And I decided that I'm not going to tolerate it. And I'm not going to be in denial like my relatives who got murdered. And I am going to be out and proud, as my gay community taught me. I'm going to be a Jew. And I'm going to wear this, but I'm not going to wear this. This was my grandmother's. Never again.
We've just heard so much. Is there something new that any of you heard? Is there something that in particular you'd like to respond to? What's the conversation that we're missing in the pews? Rev Deb.
I just want to make it really plain here. When we use this word supremacist, that it isn't so much just an either or. It's that when you're in that state of the extreme supremacy, you're right, period. And anything that comes up against you is wrong. The one that they were going to hang in the Capitol was the Vice President, Mike Pence, who was one of them, who was there if Trump got re-elected, Pence would have been the vice president. I mean, their whole action in there was to create this circumstance for their reality to continue. So I want to make it really clear here that this isn't just about a taking sides like us versus them, but that if you let the supremacy train run right on through, it will run over you wherever you are, because it will run over anything and everything in order for it to accomplish its goal.
Thank you. And I want to, Bobby, I just want to remind people that the Q&A is available for you to ask an individual panelist a question or in general. So go ahead and do that. It's go ahead, Bobby, you had something.
Yeah, just to chime in real quick from those videos. First, just wow. I've watched those videos, all of them at least 4 or 5 times each, and to prepare for this. And man, Karen's especially hits me every time. And I also want to really express my deep gratitude to all 3 of them for sharing their thoughts with us. First of all, just so all those watching know, man, we spent a lot of time together, the panelists kind of preparing for this, sharing our thoughts and what does this look like, and learning from one another. At least I know I've learned a lot. And one of the things that came up as we were talking, preparing, that then came up in my denomination requires us to do annual anti-racism training. And I just did that a couple of weeks ago. And then it came up again in something I was watching the other day, is this reality and idea of re-traumatizing and re-traumatization. And I'm learning that there's so much more emotional capital for people of color and other marginalized communities to relive a situation like this than there is for me. And so I know it's not easy to share. And those were such powerful thoughts. So I am so grateful that they were willing to do that. So thank you to all 3 of you. I also thought it was important to note that all 3 of them pointed to specific examples of racism and prejudice and white supremacy right here in Santa Cruz County. All 3. And it wasn't just the big stuff, right? It included microaggressions. And, a few years back at a conference I was at, I went to a session called Why Black Lives Matter to White Churches. And it was led by Michael McBride, who's a minister who does racial reconciliation and justice work out of Oakland. And he talked about the problem with our binary picture of racist and not racist, right? Either you're a racist, which gives this image of you've got a cross burning in your front yard, or if you're not there, then you must not be racist. And his suggestion was perhaps we need to talk more about racial anxiety, right? Like we're all on a spectrum somewhere and we all have implicit bias, especially those of us who are white and especially those of us with a certain amount of privilege. And so I just think if we as people of faith want to have any credibility or voice in the moral center of this conversation of our culture, we've got to get real and confess our own shortcomings and the ways that our very own community, that it exists here. And doing better starts with listening and with amplifying voices that are already saying what we need to hear, as well as speaking out and educating one another. So anyways, just a few thoughts. And I really do appreciate what was said in a lot of those words in those videos.
And Paula, Rabbi Paula.
So I also wanted to go off of what Reverend Deb and both Bobby have been saying about, and it came up earlier also about permitting ourselves to be uncomfortable in a learning stage of our lives, so that not only are we taking in the pain of those who are sharing, especially having just watched these videos, and also being curious about the people who don't agree with us and how we approach all of that, and how we can be bridges, and how we listen and try to understand. And as Rev D has been lifting up, how much this is all of us. This train wreck could include all of us, right? Including, Mike Pence, right? So what is it how are we participating and having our conversations in ways that alienate people who disagree with us? What are the things that we need to take a look at in ways that we contribute to setting up this dynamic of right and wrong, which is really, really a hard process. Like, are there things in our own behavior, as I think I can speak for the rest of the panelists to say, progressives, that we might need to examine so that we can actually try to build this new world together, birth this new world together? What do we have to do? Not just to examine our implicit bias, which is a very painful, as Pastor Bobby points out, a very painful process to claim that and to look at that, but also to say, what are the walls that I'm building that keep me being able to listen to and be curious about their opinions that are different from me. And that's very, very, very hard. That is very, very, very hard. Who has the capacity to do that when, right? Can we take turns? Can we be the ones that step into the breach? And it's very difficult. And I think that if there is any opportunity for healing in this country, that's what it's going to require. And our religious traditions do speak to that. You know, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor. Some people say, who is yourself, not just as yourself. Love your neighbor who is yourself, meaning you have to understand within yourself how to love yourself. And by the way, that Hebrew word reacha, which means neighbor, it also has resh ayin, which means ra, which means bad. Love the bad as yourself, meaning we each have these inclinations in Jewish tradition towards the good and towards the bad. And how do we work with that within ourselves so that we are able to then come to a place of being in relationship with our neighbor?
I'm not sure what happened to Rev Bev.
I know what happened to Rev Bev because I just got a text from her that her power went out.
Oh,
So she's going to try and get on her phone in a moment. It may be
running to the coffee shop.
professional, but she'll be here. Maybe.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bobby. This important question that you just raised, Paula, and it did come in, when people registered, we invited them to ask a question in advance of this event, and we got a lot. We got so many that we cannot even begin to tackle them all, but we thought this one might be a place to leap, which is, in what ways have you been fostering dialogue in your communities between people with different political perspectives? We know, as we said, it's all right here in our own communities, in our own churches. Are there specific things that you've been doing to try to reach across the chasm? Anyone want to jump in and respond to that? And Rev D.
Yes. I want everybody to remember that everything that happens at the macro level, like at the big collective or political level, is just a reflection of what's happening at the individual level, like at the personal level. So you can't have a warring nation without warring people. You can't have a peaceful nation without peaceful people. So in terms of that, quote unquote, like fostering the dialogue, we do it at multiple levels. We'll do it at the macro level, but we'll also encourage each individual person, do it at your level. Keep your heart open, hope, heart open, possibility consciousness, and engagement. So it's like, don't unfriend your relatives. Keep talking, keep loving each other, even if you don't agree. Keep modeling, be that thing that you want to see, regardless of what the other people are doing. Like, what are you doing? And we're all, in my ministry, we're always fostering these dialogues, because what I know is that if I could be like real specific here, like right now at this point in time, when I hear people say, well, I don't know how, 74 million people could vote for Trump and vote blah, blah, blah. I don't know who was voting for what. Everybody that voted for Biden wasn't voting for Biden. They were voting against Trump. And a lot of the people who were voting for Trump weren't voting for Trump. They were voting against something else. And I have to assume responsibility that I'm part of that which they were voting against. And just to be with that. So in terms of the fostering the dialogue, I have to accept that everything I am and that everything that I stand for is such an incredible threat to the traditional status quo. Having been one of the first ones to get legally married here in California, with people feeling like I hijacked their institution of marriage, the same way that we're saying that other people came and hijacked Christianity for supremacist purposes, that being part of this quote unquote minority population that's just growing and growing and growing, so that now for the past 20 years, white evangelicals, white Christians actually are the minority. This is a sea change, And we're watching almost 300 voter repression laws happening now, trying to squelch this new political voice and power so that it can't take, quote unquote, the majority, position. I could go on, but the bottom line is that part of this fostering is not just pointing the finger and saying, what's wrong with you, but accepting some of the responsibility that I and my presence and who I stand for and everything that I have been fighting for has rocked people's worlds and have to be part of the negotiation about how do we make it through.
Thank you. Thank you. See, Bev is finding her way back. We're in the midst of this reflection on these videos, reflection also on this question of what are we doing in our own communities to be in dialogue with people of differing views, and this interior work that Rev D is talking about, building that. Does anyone have anything more in that? Because we can, Rabbi Paula.
Yeah, I think all I would add to that, such an important message from Rev Deb is that while we don't always hear from those folks in our progressive communities, they're there. I just want to remind everybody that they are, as you said, Rev D, they are us. They are us. And I'm thinking back to a moment when we, right after the 2016 election, that was Tuesday. It's always on a Tuesday. That Wednesday evening, I just called a meeting in our sanctuary of people who wanted to just come and share their thinking and what was going on for them. And it was really clear that this was not going to be an anti-Trump listening circle. This was going to be a listening circle where everybody was just get to share their feelings, anything that they were thinking, what their fears might be. And we went around, 70 people showed up at the drop of a hat. And we ran around this circle and we sat and we just didn't interact in terms of giving feedback. We just really listened to each other. We sat quietly and we, opened with a prayer, and then we sat and we just listened to each other. And I think, now, of course, with the pandemic, we haven't been able to be together, which I think, as we know, both has connected us more and also kept us apart, which is very, very, very hard because we're not able to sit in a big room. January 6th, we couldn't that evening, or January 7th, sit, in a big circle and listen to each other. But I think that's what we're being called on also, is to try to, in some way or another, come from a prayerful place, meditative place, a place of opening up the heart, as you said, Rev D, and really just listen without arguing and without fighting, just be able to listen.
Thank you. We might be able to then, welcome back, Rev Bev. Sorry about the this mystery of Zoom and mystery of PG&E and all the rest of it. Let's start to take a few questions that are coming in. This is just such a rich, deep, essential, challenging conversation we're having here. And Sarah, would you like to pick a couple of those? I saw this one that might be interesting to start with, but maybe we could start with this one, and then Sarah, you could pick up the others. How do you suggest we talk to very young children about what happened, about the mob takeover of the Congress, and about protests and Black Lives Matters? This is from Julie Edwards. Anybody have a question, a response to that? How are you, Bobby, as a parent? I don't want to put you on the spot, but how are you talking to your kids about that? What are we saying to the kids?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess I've got the youngest set here, right? I have a second grader, a sixth grader, and an eighth grader at home. And like I said, we were actually watching it during my second grader's birthday, right? And my initial response, it's such a tough one because so many parents have different perspectives on how much they want to protect their kids versus how much they share. I land more on the being honest with them and sharing what's happening in the world. And one of the ways that's been helpful for us is not just to show it and just say this is what's happening, but so we do every once a week, 1 week ish, we try to have like a family night, right? Where we'll kind of really make it about, hey, how are you guys doing? And we'll read some books. Sometimes it'll be a spiritual story. But one of the things we did is we read through a book I highly recommend called This Book is Anti-Racist, and spent time every week. We'd read a chapter of that. And it was a chance for them to respond and for us to just have the conversation. And so that's one answer that I would highly encourage, is just to be talking to them honestly. And I don't know how helpful that is, but that's my first thought, my first response from my own experience.
Very practical and real. Thanks. And Rabbi Paula.
Not to center Judaism, but I just wanted to say this question comes up a lot when parents are asking me, how do we teach about the Holocaust? And, how old should kids be when we start telling them? It's really true for anything, like what's the level of exposure and protection? What's that quotient look like, that equation look like? And it's hard because we want to protect our children, and yet we also want them to build some resiliency and capacity. And so I really love what you said, Bobby, about carving out time in the family to be able to have these conversations, and really being thoughtful about when, how old is your child? If you have a preschooler, that conversation is going to be very, very different than it would be with your second grader, right, Bobby? I mean, I think that part of that is like you said, stories. And, when children are young, to be able to build some sense of empathy, and letting them hear stories about people who have had some struggles. That it's all developmentally appropriate. And I love that it's Julie Olson Edwards who asked the question, who has been such a leader in our early childhood education realm here in Santa Cruz. So, we know that we have to just consider our own, who our children are, what capacity they have, and also not shelter them from the reality of what is, and try to bring in these conversations with a level of story, because I think that's what they respond to best.
I love all of that. And I want to throw in one other thought, which is that I know one thing that's really challenged me is, one, our kids have a lot more capacity than we think, first of all. And second of all, I think what starts to make me bristle when I think about protecting my kids is talking to my friends of color who are like, our kids have lived with this from day one. And so there's a part of me that goes, what am I really protecting them from? Like, I mean, we have that conversation. I say, I know this seems hard, but do you recognize these are the things that your friends at school, you may not hear about it, but this is what they're experiencing. And it's good for you to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. was that a thought you wanted to raise there, Rev D?
Well, I wanted to throw it to Rev Beverly first before I just gave a slightly different approach.
You're muted there, Bev. Can't get you unmuted. Yeah. Keep trying, but we're not hearing you. Maybe Sarah has some help on that. In the meantime, while you're working to unmute, go ahead, Rev D.
Oh, looks like she's got it now. All right,
Bev.
I'll just say. So when I'm talking to kids, a lot of times the perspective that I come from, and I do that with adults too, which is this sort of knowing that in the back of their minds, they're thinking, well, what does this have to do with me? So I usually try to start there. So it's not just about like some other people. And I'll start with the narrative about how we're all created equal and we're all special and we're all unique. It's just sometimes everybody hasn't known that. And the things that we've done haven't necessarily reflected that. Like there's some cleanup that we have to do. And I'll come at from that perspective of, there's some things that have happened and here's what we need to start doing now and get them engaged in what we need to start doing now. And then explaining why it's been necessary, but get them engaged in the sort of, we need to clean up the parks. We need to clean up the beaches. And I found that grabs them sometimes rather than just hearing about atrocity first.
Bev, are you
Can
live?
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yay.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Oh, I'll come back. Sorry. Yeah. So going back to Bobby and Rev Deb saying thrown over to me, I think that working with juveniles at juvenile hall has opened my eyes and learned from their perspective what I could never have learned on my own, because the majority of the youth are of color and their experiences. And so while we're teaching our children, we also have to learn from them because their world is not the world we were in when we were in school. So I give an example of a shooting that happened. And I think it was, there's been so many, but I think it was at a movie theater. And I made a comment to one of the youth that, can you still hear me?
Yes,
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. It doesn't feel safe anywhere. And this young man looked at me and he said, with all due respect, Rev Bev, I have never felt safe anywhere. He said, going to school in Watsonville, getting off the bus, walking in my neighborhood, I have never felt safe. And it opened up a conversation and opened up my heart and my mind to think, oh my gosh, here I was, this privileged white woman saying, well, now I can't even go to the theater. So I want to encourage us to listen to our speakers this morning, but our youth that we're around at either in the synagogue or church or in our neighborhood, and learn from them as well.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Bev. There was another question that I think might be interesting from actually to take from Wilma Gold. How do we encourage the folks in our community who are extremely conservative or might be resistant, at least, to anti-racism and anti-bias to talk with us, to be part of the conversation? Does anyone have any insight there? You know, what is it? What does it take to reach across, to keep that channel open to, you know, where there's that resistance, that bumping up against that? Does anyone have a thought about that? Rabbi Paula.
Yeah, I think we go back to what Rev D was saying earlier about being willing to listen. What is that resistance? Where does that resistance come from? What, you know, help me understand what it is that you're concerned with, and that what is it that prevents you from wanting to be engaged in this work? Help me. Is there a story? Is there an experience that you had that you're, you know, or that a belief that you have? Help me understand what that is so I can engage with you. And you know, I think my grandmother, God bless her soul, used to say, nobody, and Karen made reference to this as well, Karen Babbitt, nobody cares about the Jews except the Jews, so why are you going to worry about anybody else, right? Don't worry about all these other issues, you just have to worry about the Jews. And, you know, she came from Hungary, said goodbye to her grandparents, not knowing it was the last time she would ever see them again, not knowing why her mother was crying when they left to go to America, to the US. And I think, you know, that question of what is it that you are carrying? How are you looking at those of us that are doing this anti-racism work? What is it that you find difficult? You know, what's your experience? So I think if we come from that place, like Rev D was saying earlier, as seeing us, we're together in this, and starting to unpack what it is that is in my how I speak and my behavior that might be objectionable, and do the work together to come up with common language that we can use to be able to approach each other. That's part of it. And it's what I believe it's what our traditions call us to do. You know, we are, as I said earlier, supposed to welcome the stranger. And if we're talking for me, for us, those Jews in the room about Passover, that's what we say, is that all who are hungry come and eat at this table, right? We lift up the matzah. And so what are you hungry for, right? It's not just physical food, right? It's nourishment. And so maybe there's a lack or a loss or something that's painful that we need to understand about how we have these conversations.
Right on. And Rev D.
I'll answer it at two levels. One is that don't think of a conversation so much as an exchange of words about a subject. That what we need more than anything is just engagement. That you have to build up the trust to be able to have deep conversations. So you want to look for common ground, whether it's something around the kids or you know, sheltering in place and, you know, food banks, or, you know, it's like you'll find what that is in your neighborhood or whatever that can be that place where everybody can rally. You've got a block party and everybody just bring a dish. What you want to do is take the fangs and the horns off to show that, you know, you don't have a pitchfork, and let people see you and get more comfortable with you. And let that grow into relationships. So that's at one level. The other level is that we often refer to it as the low-hanging fruit. People always have this question about how can I get the ones furthest away from me, like into the circle, but that's not how change happens. Change happens, it's like a nucleus at the center that just keeps expanding out. So we call it the low-hanging fruit. Who else is ready for this conversation? Not the How do I get the furthest one to be interested? But how can I make it plain to the one who does want to have this conversation that I'm ready to have it? And maybe it's just something like, Bobby has been talking here, a book club, and just put it out to anybody. We're going to be studying this material, anybody that wants to come, and we welcome people from all different, political views. And somebody will take you up on that. You don't get to choose the who, just make it available.
Right on. And Paula, you have one quick thing, and then we're going to.
Very quickly, I just wanted to say that, yes, and in religious, spiritual communities, we mourn together, we celebrate together across all of those differences. And I think that that's also something to remember, that whether it's a new birth or a death, that we will join together at the cemetery, we will join together in the sanctuary, and that we don't check each other's political identities at the door to the building.
So
I know you said real quick, I'm going to say something real unhelpful, so I probably shouldn't even throw it in, but I'm gonna, which is just that also, I just want people to recognize, at least for myself, I'm still figuring a lot of this out too. These are a lot of great principles that I'm working on, but it's still a challenge, and especially I know a lot of questions came in about family and how we talk to family. And I think that's maybe even more difficult with those people close to us. And I just want to recognize that even though we are in ministry, we are also in process, and we're figuring it out too. And so come on the journey with us. So I don't know how helpful that is, except for just to say that these aren't always going to work for you, but we're all in it together and trying to figure it out.
Thank you. And I think that's why we started the Tent of Abraham, is just try to get people in the room and just start somewhere, just start somewhere. So we're winding up our time together, and it's a good thing the panel decided let's have a little, for those who want to stay after for a little bit, because obviously there's lots more to talk about. But Christians are in the midst of the season of Lent now, and we're working our way toward this Paschal mystery of the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And our Jewish brothers and sisters are, as Paula said, about to celebrate the Passover with Paula's t-shirt there, the liberation of the Hebrew people from the oppression of the Pharaoh. So I wanted to give each of you a chance to share, is there some perspective or practice from the wisdom of your faith that you might leave with everyone, a sense of hope or inspiration for these times, that you're drawing from your own tradition that you might offer the people who are listening today? Who would like to go first? It's Beverly's. I think her internet is just having a problem there. So maybe Paula, would you be willing to go on then?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I've just been so moved by this conversation, and I want to thank all of you for being here and being so thoughtful and so open-hearted. And I'm going back to this idea that in Jewish text, in the Torah, there's no mention of the Messiah. There's no mention of a specific figure, but the rabbis of later generations teach that there is going to be a divinely sent figure who will one day arrive in our broken, imperfect world to be the agent of healing. And they ask, well, when is this Messiah going to arrive? When will this reckoning take place? And one opinion has it that the Messiah will arrive either when the world is good enough to merit, or when the world is broken enough to be in such great need. And so what that tells me is that, can we see the brokenness that we've been talking about today and also reach for the healing and the goodness? Can we work together to fix what we can? And at the end of the Passover meal, we lift up Elijah's cup, the cup of the prophet Elijah, who is said to be the messenger of bringing the messianic time. And we also now, as has been happening in many traditions, welcome the feminine. We welcome Miriam the Prophetess, who was the one who's well nourished the people in the wilderness and who celebrated and danced with the people after liberation when they walked through the sea, the parted sea. And we have to celebrate what is good in our lives. That's what I'm looking at right now, that to do this work, there also has to be joy. that we have to take in that self-care that we need to be able to have the capacity to celebrate and to dance and to sing. And as for Elijah, you know, there's a story about a famous rabbi who asked the prophet Elijah when the Messiah would arrive. And Elijah said, ask the Messiah himself. He's sitting at the gates of the city among the poor and the sick, helping them with the bandages on their wounds, meaning anyone can be the bringer of the Messianic age, sitting at the city gate, feeding anyone who needs it, helping house those who are unhoused. So here's my suggestion. Open up our doors. We're going to open our door at the end of the Seder, the Passover meal, to welcome in this energy of joy and redemption and celebration, to welcome in this presence of caring and fixing and healing. What are you going to open your door to this year? What is it that, as this spring approaches, as this rebirth, this moment of spring in Jewish tradition, in Christian tradition, what is it that you're going to, as we move through the narrowness of this pandemic and this reckoning with what is happening in our world, how are you going to open your door? Can we celebrate a new day together? That's the practice I'm thinking about right now.
Thank you, Rabbi Paula. Pastor Bobby, from your tradition.
Yeah. So as I was thinking about this, what practice has I found helpful and can help us in this moment. There's a lot of noise right now, right? A lot of treble in the mix, if you will, that high end of the frequencies of the music that just jumbles together. And I think one of the things that faith communities can offer us, in addition to language to help us speak about spiritual realities and community to be on that journey with, is a reminder and a connection to those bass notes, you know, that grounding that fills out the sound, that reminds us that while the treble is important and has to be addressed, that there's this rumbling, this constant that recognizes we've been here before, and the arc of the universe is long and bends toward justice. So for myself, contemplation and centering prayer has been a really helpful practice to connect me to that. My spiritual director has a really helpful definition I found of contemplation, that is a long, loving look at that which is real. And so centering prayer really invites us just to find a quiet space, to close your eyes, to open your heart to that invisible but always present origin of all that exists. Some people will use a sacred word or a phrase to center on or focus on one's breath. And then just practice silence and deep listening for whether it be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever that looks like. But that's a practice that I've appreciated. And in my mind, everything is spiritual, and social justice is a spiritual act and a practice as well. And they're two sides of the same coin. For me, it's in the grounding and centering of ourselves that allows us to more effectively open ourselves to transformation, and then to doing the long, hard work of social transformation. So that's what I'd throw out.
Thank you. Rev Bev, got some, unmute yourself there. It's a closing, your practices.
My practices, when the power goes out and you have to find your cell phone, and that's my practice, is like, okay, center. So, okay. So I did write a little something for my closing, since I missed all the good questions. A very wise spiritual leader once.
Oh dear.
What I believe.
Go ahead.
Start again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. A very wise spiritual leader once said, my religion is kindness. In that same spirit of capturing the heart of what I believe, I would say my religion is love. Perhaps there are many other words people could use to describe their way of faith, and yet a single word can say so much. It causes us to stop and consider more deeply. One word can say more than 1,000. What is the core of our wisdom, the cause of our actions, the essence of what we seek to share? Returning to these questions over and over is the exercise of our souls. It is the challenge of our faith. What we believe, we say. What we say, we do. What we do, we are.
Right on. Thank you. So, Rev D, your closing thoughts.
My spiritual tradition is a very universal approach, looking at the best that we have from established religious traditions, native traditions, nature traditions. And I would add the nature part to round this out right now, that as we're coming upon the spring, there's so much metaphor about this transition from winter to spring, this renewal, this birth, this transformation, that no matter how forlorn something looks, no matter how barren the trees may be, that with the warmth of the sun's love, the spring becomes the rose, like the song says. And the other thing that's big for my tradition is just being there of service. In that parable about the neighbor, when the lawyers are asking Jesus, well, who is the neighbor? If that's supposed to be the greatest commandment, to love your neighbor as yourself. And he goes and tells this story. I won't tell the whole story, but the bottom line is it's that story of, quote unquote, the Good Samaritan. But what most people don't realize is that the Samaritans and the Jews were arch enemies. They weren't supposed to touch each other. They weren't supposed to have any contact with each other. And here it was the enemy who shows up and takes the bloodied man to the inn and pays for him to be cared for. And Jesus says, well, who was the neighbor? So I think that we just have to remember that being that neighbor means still showing up. In practical terms for us, it's throughout all COVID, not stopping. We have our food bank open on Thursdays at noon. We're pushing out about 8,000 pounds of food like every week. Come one, come all, like whomever, and just being that presence of giving no matter what.
And there it is, folks. We have really covered it today. So I want to invite you not to leave, but to stay for just a couple minutes more to watch a beautiful music video in closing with us. Leah Morris is the artist and kindly shared her work with us. I think it will inspire you. So I'd like to thank you to the Santa Cruz Public Libraries for making this forum possible, especially Sarah back there with all the tech work that she's done. She's a genius. And of course, Judy Russell for imagining the possibilities of this series, Shelter in Faith. And I'd really like to offer a deep bow to you, the panelists, for taking on this critical conversation this morning. And it's through the partnerships like this that we're doing in the Tent of Abraham to create a more informed community so that we all can commit to this work of justice and building this democracy. So, and it's together that we work for peace, and together we bring hope and light to one another. So take a look at how being a part of a faith community can help you navigate these times. I think in the chat box there's a list of the communities that are part of Tent of Abraham, and if you're interested in this interfaith work, that's where you might land. To learn more about the Tent of Abraham, you can go to our website, tofasantacruz.org. So the panel will stick around a few more minutes if you want to stay on. There were tons of questions, and we'll chat with you for a little longer. So right now, we'll listen to this closing, beautiful, hopeful song together. Thank you.
There is always a light when we are ready to see it. There is always a light when we are ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill. Together we will. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to see it. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always shine your light. There is always dark. We are ready to see it. There is always shine your light. There is always in the dark. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a kindness till we together we will. There is always shine your light. There is always dark. There is always shine your light. There is always dark. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a kindness till we together.